What's going on, everybody? Mortem here, this time bringing you a look at Soulframe, or more specifically Soulframe Preludes, which there is, technically speaking, a difference, but this is a game that is currently under a sort of like closed pre-alpha test. Though you may or may not have heard about it because they've been doing some, advertising at some recent game shows, which is where I heard about it first and what piqued my interest. However, as I'm sure at least a few people watching already know, in looking into this game, I realized pretty quickly it's not my usual jam. That is because it is from Digital Extremes, the people behind Warframe, and is an MMO. They like to use the term co-op RPG, but by all accounts it seems to be an MMO. Nonetheless, after some of the things I had seen in the previews and whatnot, I was just really curious about what this game was and what it entailed, so when Digital Extremes via a PR company reached out and asked if I wanted to take a look at it, I went ahead and said yes, though I did make it clear MMOs are not my usual jam. But like I said, I was curious, and I figured maybe this video explaining some of this stuff would help someone if they stumbled across it in the future, so let's get into it. First things first, while I was provided access to this, currently that is, I would say, the primary way to get into it is to be invited into this pre-alpha testing. It is possible to buy your way in via a founder pack over on the Soulframe website, but that is the only place it is currently available. They are planning to eventually roll it out to, like the normal usual platforms and stuff, so you'll be able to buy it on the typical digital storefronts, and I believe they want to bring it to console at some point, but I'm not sure on that. Outside of that, the game is therefore a little unfinished. In fact, just playing through it for the sake of making this video and taking a look at stuff, it crashed on me multiple times, which, yes, obviously isn't great, but with it being a pre-alpha, it doesn't really mean much. Though, that said, it has been in this prelude stage for a while, I think at least a year or so. I'm not exactly sure when it started, but they've frankly had time to release a few updates here and there, and things have evolved and changed since they started, and so you can kind of see the beginnings of what they have in mind here. Starting first then with the story. So, story-wise, best I can tell, we play a character that was touched by some sort of fey magic, and it has changed your arm from birth into what they call a pact arm that you can swap out and make pact with certain individuals who can then, of course, grant you various types of power. However, you inhabit a world called Alka. Alka is this big sort of green wild place that people were very in touch with nature and everything, and this place was invaded by the Ode. The Ode are these high technology sort of alien-esque people who have come here to dominate the land, as you would expect, and have turned to destroying the wildlife, in particular with this sort of liquid metal substance, which I believe is called ichor. And believe it or not, that stuff is in fact polluting the environment, turning beasts crazy, and seemingly has a certain degree of effect on people's memory as well, because it would seem that at some point or another you were conscripted into the army of these people before being branded a traitor and kicked out. In particular, it looks like you were initially left for dead, only to miraculously survive, of course. But all of that in mind, it doesn't look like this game has a traditional character creation as of yet. Right now, what you can do is pick some features for your mother, actually, in a cutscene which then affects your character. And then later on, you'll eventually unlock a vendor that can change it up for you as well. But it's mostly just some hairstyle options, a few face options, that kind of thing. And it's nothing crazy. And given the state of the pre-alpha, again, not a terribly surprising move. Curious if they will expand on that a great deal later. But realistically, as you begin to explore the island you wash up on and take the fight to these Ode people and try to just generally fix the problems that have arisen in nature, you're going to be doing a lot of progression, because as you reconnect with your powers that come from your arm, you've got a lot going on. You've got the arm itself, which is going to give you access to a pact that you can then level up by using it. Leveling that up gives you access to a skill tree within that pact arm that, of course, upgrades it and gives you various abilities to use, some magical abilities even, that kind of thing. And then there is your equipment. You're going to be able to equip a bunch of different weapon types, so it does look like items have a stat requirement, or at least a stat via your virtues, of which there are simply 3, and you'll increase those as you go. But the weapons in particular are divided up into a bunch of different types, as you would probably expect, but as you use that weapon type, you'll gain experience for it and then get access to another skill tree that way. You'll also get access to these things called totems, which are typically, at least so far anyway, picked up by interacting with various animals in nature, and this rewards you the totem, and then you can socket those totems into the various slots of a weapon, and lining up those totems with the exact virtue you have produces a better effect. And then you can also slot a rune into a weapon to go even farther with it. And then if that wasn't enough, there's also some extra stuff that I believe is independent of the weapons around like doing smites and whatnot. So occasionally as you hit enemies, they will like spawn these orbs, and you can use those orbs to trigger an effect called Pull Smite, which is kind of weird. But that sets off like a little explosion, and that, involving some basic combos and everything, is, I would say, the gist of the combat system. Combat thus far doesn't seem like crazy complicated or anything. It's kind of a basic, almost action-adventure melee combat system where you've got your basic, attacks, blocks, parries, that kind of thing. The parry is relatively tame for the people that always freak out when they hear that, but if anything, it really does play a lot like an action-adventure compared to most anything else. At least here in the early game, that may well change, though I did get up to and fight one of the bosses, and that seems relatively chill as well. But moving on a little bit from there, then you've got your more traditional stuff like exploration and interacting with various factions and whatnot. So exploration is pretty straightforward. You just kind of run around, explore, find points of interest, interact with things like animals, or interact with bits of lore, gather up materials that you can use for crafting and everything, but a lot of that is done from a central hub that is accessible from basically everywhere, called the Nightfold. So this is a place you can sort of warp into that you can access a bunch of services from, provided you have unlocked them and gotten far enough to access those services. This is where, later on you'll get access to like your blacksmith to do your crafting and upgrade all your weapons and whatnot. It's also where you go to upgrade your pact as well, and just kind of generally mess around with your equipment and anything else you would typically do in town. And the rest of it is you kind of exploring and doing a little bit of questing as you go. There's some interactable stuff. This part seems relatively bare bones at the moment, which I mean, again, is pretty par for the course as far as a pre-alpha goes. And I imagine it's the part they will fill out as time goes on. However, that said, there are in fact factions called enclaves you can join. I didn't really mess around with these personally, haven't gotten that far, but my understanding is that there are 3 of them, and you can join one, eventually changing between them if you like, and that comes with the typical rewards and the like that you'll be able to mess around with. But given that this is from the people who made Warframe itself being known for being pretty grindy from what I understand, I would not be surprised at all if all of those resources and the factions and everything lead into the sort of MMO grind you may well be used to, and given that this game is free to play, and thus will almost certainly be leaning on some sort of cash shop to make ends meet, again, none of that is how that actually feels when the game is fully released at some point remains to be seen, but is certainly of note, I guess. But as of right this moment, I would say that's just about everything I've got to say about it. Like I said, this was mostly just me satisfying my own curiosity, and I figured I would share that with someone who maybe also didn't know what this was all about. But if you happen to have played this for yourself or you're interested in it, I'd love to hear what you guys think about it down in the comment section below. But I freely admit I'm unlikely to cover this one a ton. I might take another look at it when it releases in full just to kind of see what changed and everything. But otherwise, I'm simply happy that I got a better understanding of what the game actually entails. But all of that naturally means to like, comment, subscribe, all that YouTube jazz. But regardless of any of that, truly, just thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. May you wander in wisdom and have an amazing day.